Right, so our first story begins in Malaysia, where Mahathir Mohamad is set to become the world's oldest leader as Prime Minister. Let's take a look at some of the oldest politicians who held crucial posts in India, starting with the President first. India's 8th President, R. Venkatraman, took oath at the age of 76 in 1987. Interestingly, 3 presidents were of 76 years of age when they were sworn in for the post. However, there was a difference of a few months between them. They were K.R. Narayanan, Pranab Mukherjee and Venkatraman himself. Let's talk about India's oldest Prime Minister. Morarji Desai was sworn in as country's 4th Prime Minister when he was 81 in the year 1977. He was also the world's oldest person to become a Prime Minister at that age. Now, shifting focus to the post of Chief Minister, Punjab's 5-time Chief Minister Prakash Singh Badal holds the distinction of India's oldest Chief Minister. He served office till the age of 89 until last year. Right, joining me for more on this story is my colleague Aditya Dhuna. Good evening, Aditya. Now, we've seen Mahathir Mohamad make a comeback at the age of 92. What do you make of India's politicians? I mean, should there be a bar on the age limit for politicians?
Yeah, Ramesh, I was doing some research and I did come up with a few names. Ram Jethmalani, he started his political career with the BJP, now with the RJD. He's 94. You mentioned of Prakash Singh Badal of the Shiromani Akali Dal. He's 90. Speaking about leaders from down south, M. Karunanidhi, he's 93 and he still continues to make headlines. He has given up the leadership of his party, but he's still part of key political conversations. So, if I can say so, India has its own share of evergreen politicians in a way.
Also, Aditya, now Prime Minister Modi has said that his government's policy is that all politicians after 75 years of age should retire from public life and should not hold any office. Should that be something which other countries can emulate?
And a few of these ministers did resign once they turned 75, but none of these so-called rules are cast in stone, Ramesh. Our research team was doing some number crunching. Things have changed a bit, especially with this particular Lok Sabha. The BJP MPs that represent the BJP MPs in the lower house of the Indian Parliament, those who are aged below above 70 rather, their numbers have dropped from 14.2% to 8.8%. In the last Lok Sabha, there were more members from the 25 to 40 age gap. That was the Congress government then. So obviously India being a young country, and this has been a growing debate that we need some young faces representing India in the political arena as well. So, and in fact, if I speak of areas like Delhi University and student politics, these have become very active areas for the prospective politicians to shine before they step on to the national scene or the regional political scene.
Right, on that note, Aditya, thank you so much for joining me with all the latest on that story. Right, shifting focus from Asia now to Europe. Why does Russia allow Israel to strike its ally Syria? Israel targeted Syrian bases even as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was in Moscow for the Victory Day celebrations. So this makes it a bit complicated. Russia defends Iran and Syria, but it hosted their bitter enemy Benjamin Netanyahu, who in turn is bombing Syrian and Iranian assets. Netanyahu flew to Moscow on Wednesday to meet Putin, hours after US President Donald Trump quit the Iranian nuclear deal, and after Syria accused Israel of carrying out a fresh missile strike on an army base near Damascus. Now, since intervening in the Syrian civil war on behalf of President Bashar al-Assad in 2015, Russia has generally turned a blind eye to Israeli attacks on suspected arms transfers and deployments by Assad's Iranian and Lebanese Hezbollah allies. However, Moscow had condemned an earlier airstrike that killed 7 Iranians in Syria on April the 9th. Now, here's the Israeli Prime Minister taking aim at Iran from Moscow.
во многом нас объединяет отношение к нацизму, фашизму.
הצגתי את החובה של ישראל ואת הזכות של ישראל להגן על עצמה מפני התוקפנות באיראן, מאיראן, משטחה של סוריה, נגד מדינת ישראל. האיראנים מצהירים שבכוונתם לתקוף אותנו, הם מנסים להעביר לשם כוחות ונשק קטלני, במטרה מפורשת לתקוף את מדינת ישראל, כחלק מהאסטרטגיה שלהם להשמיד את מדינת ישראל.
Right, joining me live from Amman in Jordan is my colleague Daniele Pagani. Good evening, Daniele. What is Vladimir Putin up to in West Asia?
Good evening to you, Ramesh, and good evening to all our viewers. I think that Vladimir Putin, as of now in West Asia, is trying to present himself as the only neutral and balanced power in the troubles that are mounting at the horizon. You correctly pointed it out that Russia was always aware about what Israel was doing and where it was going when it comes to Iranian presence in Syria, despite fighting alongside Iranian-backed militias and Iranian trainers and military personnel on the side of beside President Bashar al-Assad. I think we also have to consider that the fact that Russia supports President Bashar al-Assad does not mean directly that Russia supports whatever Iran is up to in Syria, which means establishing a formal military presence on the ground. So these are the difference. Putin is trying to present itself as a neutral power breaker. He's trying to be friend with Israel and Iran at the same time, but he's not interfering when anything comes to a conflict between these two countries.
Very quickly, Daniele, we saw that the American intervention in Syria has literally brought Russia back into the reckoning, so to speak, in West Asia. On the other hand, we've seen Russia interact and engage Iran and Turkey in finding a solution to the Syrian crisis. How do you see Russia-Iran relations evolving in going forward?
Russia and Iran relations are a little bit complicated. As I said, they are both fighting on the side of President Bashar al-Assad. They consider Assad the president of Syria, the legitimate and legal president of Syria, and they will keep defending the president of Syria. And they also have interest in keeping the United States as much as possible outside the West Asian scenario. They do have conflicting problems. For instance, the oil market is one of them. There is no doubt that the more Iran economically suffer on the oil front, the more Russia stands to gain and to sell more of its oil. So it's a complicated relation, but as of now, I would say that Russia will stand on Tehran's side when it comes to the United States, but not when it comes to countering Israeli right of defending its borders against Iran.
Right, on that note, Daniele Pagani in Amman, thank you so much for joining me on WION Dispatch. All right, moving on, U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed 3 former U.S. prisoners who landed at a military base near Washington after being released by North Korea. The prisoners were freed after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo traveled to the North Korean capital and negotiated their safe release. Pompeo arrived at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington in a medical plane with the 3 freed U.S. citizens. The 3 men, Kim Hak-song, Tony Kim and Kim Dong-chul, were smiling and waving and appeared in good health. The trio had been jailed for anti-state activities and placed in labor camps in North Korea. The White House has lauded the Kim regime for releasing the 3 men, saying it helped to create a positive atmosphere before the upcoming summit.
We have a meeting scheduled in a very short period of time. You'll be hearing about it soon. We have the location set, and we will see if we can do something that people did not think was going to happen for many, many years, and a lot of bad things could have happened in between. So I just want to say this is a special night for these 3 really great people, and congratulations on being in this country.
And earlier we spoke to WION correspondent Harry Horton from Washington, D.C. on Trump greeting the U.S. citizens who returned home from North Korea. Horton believes that it is a big moment for Donald Trump's foreign policy. Listen in.
Yeah, this is a big moment for Donald Trump in terms of his foreign policy agenda. He's certainly trying to make the most of it. A very grand welcome home ceremony for those 3 Americans, the presidents, the First Lady and the Vice President Mike Pence, all travelling to that Air Force Base in the middle of the night here in Washington, D.C., I should emphasise, to welcome them home. President Trump clearly trying to capitalise on what he sees as a success of his policy towards North Korea so far, and to try and sell it to the American public in that way, to show them that, look, in his view, he's making very significant progress with North Korea. We heard some remarks from the president there where he spoke for around 7 minutes, and he was incredibly optimistic about what this means now for those talks with North Korea. He thinks it means that North Korea are serious about denuclearization, and he thinks that this is a positive step forward that shows that there could be some sort of positive outcome when the two sides do begin those talks on denuclearization.
All right, moving on. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be embarking on a two-day visit to Nepal this week. He is likely to announce 3 separate surprise gifts for Kathmandu, Janakpur and Muktinath temple. He'll visit Hindu temples and reach out to the people of Nepal. As close neighbours, India and Nepal share a unique relationship of friendship and cooperation, characterised by open borders and deep-rooted people-to-people contacts. WION's Siddhant Sibal reports from Kathmandu.
Nepal is all set to welcome the Indian Prime Minister, who will be on the two-day visit to the country from 11th to 12th of May. He will be visiting 3 cities, Janakpur, Kathmandu and Muktinath. He will be jointly inaugurating the Arun 3 project along with the Nepal's Prime Minister. The Arun 3 project is the biggest infrastructure and hydroelectric power project in Nepal.
The Indian Prime Minister will depart from Patna on an Indian Air Force helicopter and land at Janakpur's Baharbika. He will address a public rally in Janakpur, which is said to be linked to Indian tourism's Ramayan circuit. Modi will arrive in Kathmandu after completing his official engagements in Janakpur. Prime Minister Modi will be accorded a ceremonial welcome at Tundikhel in Kathmandu before he meets with Prime Minister KP Oli for delegation-level talks. Prime Ministers Oli and Modi will lay the foundation of Arun 3 hydroelectricity project through video conferencing. In Mustang, the Indian Prime Minister will visit Muktinath, which is a sacred place for both Hindus and Buddhists. Within Hinduism, it is called Mukti Kshetra, which literally means the place of liberation or moksha. This temple is considered to be the 106th among the available 108 Divya Desams considered sacred by the Sri Vaishnava sect.
The Prime Minister of India is leveraging diplomacy with faith. He, along with the Prime Minister of Nepal, will be jointly inaugurating a bus service from Janakpur, which is the birthplace of Goddess Sita, towards Ayodhya. And Janakpur will be part of the Ramayana circuit. Of course, the Prime Minister of Nepal will be receiving the Indian Prime Minister at the Janki temple in Janakpur, while the Defence Minister will be receiving the Indian Prime Minister when he arrives here in Nepal.
Oli's visit was seen as an attempt to repair Nepal's ties with India. In 2016, Oli had publicly criticized India for allegedly interfering in Nepal's internal matters and accused it of toppling his government. India is Nepal's largest trading partner and the largest source of foreign investments, besides providing transit for almost the entire third country trade of Nepal. India accounts for over 2/3 of Nepal's merchandise trade, about 1/3 of trade and services, 46% of foreign direct investments, almost 100% of petroleum supplies, and a significant share of inward remittance on account of pensioners and workers.
Well, India-Nepal ties have been a roti-beti ka rishta. The relationship has been a special one, and the Indian Prime Minister would like to make it more special with this visit. This is the third visit of the Indian Prime Minister. He first came to Nepal on a bilateral visit. Then he went to SAARC for another visit, and he came here in Nepal. And finally, this visit is happening. Big focus will be on how the Indian Prime Minister tries to build new bonds between New Delhi and Kathmandu. With video journalist Neeraj Patel, Siddhant Sibal from Kathmandu.
And Siddhant Sibal joins me live from Kathmandu now. Good evening, Siddhant. You've been travelling across Nepal for the last couple of days. What's the mood like in Kathmandu on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's visit, and what might be some of the biggest takeaways from his talks there?
Well, the mood is enthusiastic. If you go around the streets of Kathmandu, the flags are the Indian flag and the Nepali flag. And this is, of course, the third visit of the Indian Prime Minister. His visit starts tomorrow. He lands in Janakpur and then comes to Kathmandu and then Muktinath. And the focus will be faith diplomacy, because in all these three cities, he will be visiting a temple. In Janakpur, he will be visiting the Janki Devi temple, and along with the Prime Minister of Nepal, they will be flagging off a bus service connecting Janakpur to Ayodhya. In Kathmandu, he will be visiting Pashupatinath, his second visit. Remember, in 2014, he visited Nepal, his first bilateral visit, and he visited Pashupatinath. So, a second visit, and then, of course, Muktinath is on the cards. Tomorrow at 6 p.m., he will be making press statements, and of course the main deliverables is infrastructure, connectivity and agriculture. The first agriculture ministers meet between Nepal agriculture minister and of course the Indian agriculture minister will take place. That will be announced. On connectivity front, a lot of things are going to happen. An inland waterway through Kosi River is expected to be announced. Other than that, India will be building a railway line from Kathmandu to Rexall. That will connect Kathmandu Valley with the rest of the Indian railway network, and you can actually travel from Delhi to Kathmandu via a railway. And of course, other than that, the focus is on infrastructure, because the Indian Prime Minister and the Nepalese Prime Minister will be, through video conferencing, inaugurating the Arun 3 project. That, of course, is the largest infrastructure project, hydropower project here in Nepal. The three C's of the Prime Minister of India, cooperation, connectivity and culture, can be seen and will be seen during his entire two-day visit, and later he will be attending civic reception both here in Kathmandu and in Janakpur. So clearly a lot of things are lined up. It's a packed schedule, two-day schedule, and a lot of deliverables are expected, and it's a follow-up visit of the Indian Prime Minister, because the visit comes just 1 month after Nepal's Prime Minister came to India. So a lot of things are happening, and of course that will help increase India and Nepal ties. But China obviously remains an issue, because there are anxieties in New Delhi of growing Chinese influence in Kathmandu. We spoke to the foreign minister, who said that this is the perception, and Nepal wants to pursue an independent foreign policy. So a lot of things are happening. China is something it's an elephant when it comes to the relationship between India and Nepal. But other than that, a lot of other things like flood issue will be discussed. Remember, before this entire thing, the Prime Minister of Nepal had a meeting with the former Prime Ministers of Nepal and discussed this important visit.
Right. Siddhant Sibal in Kathmandu, thank you so much for joining me on WION Dispatch. Appreciate it. Right. The campaigning ahead of the polls in the southern Indian state of Karnataka has ended. All parties made a last-ditch effort to woo voters. In less than 48 hours, people of the state will cast their ballot. Right. And joining me live from Bengaluru is my colleague Nishchita Virendra. Good evening, Nishchita. The campaigning has come to a close. What's the sense you're getting after the weeks of campaigning by both the BJP and the Congress?
That's right. Good evening to you too, Ramesh. Well, after many weeks of campaigning, let's not forget that campaigning in its true sense began several months ago with both the parties setting the agenda for these elections, and today it's finally come to a closure, and with a big bang. In the beginning of the day, you saw Congress President Rahul Gandhi address the media along with the Chief Minister and several other noted leaders of the Karnataka Pradesh Congress Committee. And then later, towards the end of the day, you had Amit Shah, who is the president of the BJP, also address the media here. Both the parties minced no words in trading accusations at each other, whether it is about corruption or whether the Congress even releasing a last-minute video alleging that it features B. Sri Ramalu, who is contesting against the Chief Minister in Badami, allegedly bribing a judge for a favourable verdict in favour of Janardhan Reddy back in 2010. But now all the accusations come to a close. Now it is time for the people to decide as to who they want to vote for, and for the voters here to process all that they have heard in the last few weeks. Something that stands out for Karnataka this time is that it is a completely wave-less election if you compare it to 2013 and 2014. In 2013, there was a very strong anti-incumbency wave against the BJP, and in 2014, there was a very strong pro-Modi wave. And with neither of that being present in the state today, it is becoming very difficult for psephologists and analysts to call these elections, making it all the more thrilling.
Right, an election without a wave, says Nishchita Virendra in Bengaluru. Nishchita, on that note, thank you so much for joining me on WION Dispatch.